Welcome to Norse Code, episode 51. Remarkable week of success. Obviously, we're going to the Super Bowl now. Again, I'm your host, Dusty O'Connell, and I am here with our regular blogger and analyst. He's the editor-in-chief of Vikings Territory, a contributor to Daily Norseman and Optimum Scouting. His name is Arif Hassan. How are you, Arif?
I'm good. How are you?
Up and down, you know. I'm up on the Vikings winning, but I'm down on getting 86 from my annual survivor pool after picking Pittsburgh to beat stupid Tampa Bay.
Man, you keep chasing recent wins. That's your problem.
Well, what burns me up the most is that I was going to pick San Diego, like 7 out of 10 remaining people in my survival pool did. But I was like, I can't pick against Jacksonville 3 weeks in a row and be successful.
I mean, I understand that, but again, that's more faulty reasoning. And I mean, Pittsburgh's trash. I don't care that they won against the Panthers 39-17. Don't care about that. They're trash. That's your fault.
That's the conclusion I eventually came to. We have another 3-man pod, although this week James is out due to lack of voice. This week we are joined by, unfortunately, a Green Bay Packers fan. However, fortunately, he is the #1 Google return for his own first name, and he also writes for Bleacher Report and Draft Breakdown and his own blog, Justis Football, JUSTIS football.blogspot.com. In his second appearance as a guest on Norse Code, Justis Mosqueda.
What's up, guys?
Welcome back to the show, Justis. We are remarkably glad to have you. We wish you could have been here for the other time because you were a really great guest the first time we had you. And
you're making me blush. You're making me blush, Dusty.
We look forward to your insight on this divisional matchup. A couple of minor things to get out of the way first. Oh my God, it's so great that there is not some nonsense off the field drama that can suck up a huge portion of the podcast with the Vikings or the Ravens or any other team. I do want to throw a shout out to the 3 strangers who received hats from our intrepid producer James at the Falcons game this weekend.
James failed to acquire the names of these 3 strangers, which is fairly typical.
They should remain nameless because
jealousy over their hats.
Yeah, you know, it's important that nobody mug them for something that you might have scribbled on.
That's true.
We don't want to start that trend.
Yeah, Justice, I don't know if you know this, but James made me autograph the caps that we gave out, immediately nuking their value.
See, I'm kind of jealous about this. I mean, I've done the hat trick of podcast appearances here. I own more than 5% of podcasts that I've been on, or that you guys have.
Wow.
Had.
So, that's a good point.
I mean, the fact that I don't have a hat for the hat trick, that kind of hurts. That hurts.
Well, if you had been at the Falcons game in Minnesota last weekend, you would have had as much of an opportunity as anyone else had to get one.
What kind of response to that? Like, because I think I deserve a little bit more because I've contributed more. Well, if you did more than most people did, you could have had just as much of an opportunity to have a hat. What kind of response is that, Dusty?
Well, frankly, I answered Justis's argument on Twitter when Kyle was complaining about it. I was like, look, James just posited this idea on the show without offering me or Arif either of the hats.
That's true. We didn't get a hat. And I signed them and I didn't get a hat.
I know. I only have one Vikings hat and I hate wearing it. I didn't get an offer of a hat. I appreciate your argument, Justis, but in terms of who deserves a hat, you're kind of far down the list.
I'm hurt. So you're telling me I had to go to the one game where an NFL team actually figured out how to use Devin Hester on offense, and then I would have been awarded with the Norse Code hat. Are those the conditions?
Well,
Evidently.
I didn't get a hat. I guess I was apparently bound by the same conditions. So I guess yes.
Yep. That was the secret password.
Norse Code would like to thank our sponsors. This show exists now, thankfully ad-free because of all of you. We have one sponsor to add to the Wall of Fame this week. Let me scroll back real quick, and I will. Yes, there he is. Thank you, Basel Abul Haj, for your donation. You are now freed from ever having to listen to this portion of the podcast again. And I would like to reiterate just once real quick that if you like what we do here at Norse Code, then you can contribute your $5 to the cause just once and only once, and be free from having to listen to this part of the show ever again. Just go to our website at norsecodepodcast.com, scroll down to the very bottom of the page and click on the little PayPal donate link. And by the way, Matthew McKeon, either fix your payment information or cancel your deal because you're filling up our inbox with a lot of failed subscription emails.
All right, well, I'll just let you take care of whether or not we're being harsh to people who are giving us money.
Well, I would never be harsh to somebody that actually gave us money.
All right, what's next on our show notes? Are we going to do stuff besides...
There was a football game, I think.
Oh, yeah? Justice, did you catch any of that Vikings-Falcons game?
I caught part of the highlights, and I saw some of it back on NFL Rewind, but I didn't catch any of it live because I have to cover the Packers games on Bleacher Report.
Right. Did you catch enough of it on NFL Rewind that you're comfortable enough discussing the recap with us?
I was aware that Devin Hester learned how to play football.
Yeah, well, technically he learned how to play football against the Bucs, but I don't know if that counts as football.
No, the Buccaneers don't play NFL football. They're the D2 of whatever anything. The AFC is the Big Ten of NFL football, and the Buccaneers are just, I don't know. They just kind of hang around and we let them play.
So they're the Illinois.
I guess so. I guess they're the Illinois. That would make Lovie Smith Ron Zook.
There's no reason to slander the AFC like that, man. That's so bad. Calling them the Big Ten. That would make the Patriots Ohio State, though. That's perfect.
It really is amazing. And then that would make San Diego the breaking out team of the AFC. It's either them or Cincinnati, or them and Cincinnati would end up being Michigan State.
So then who's Minnesota, the team with an unlikely record that's not as good as it?
San Diego.
Oh, San Diego's too good to be Minnesota.
Well, maybe Minnesota's better than it looks. I don't know. And honestly, San Diego enters almost every season overrated.
Well, okay, so that fits. But, I mean, there's a lot of AFC teams. What about, no. Too many of these teams have histories. That's not useful.
Minnesota has a history. What are you talking about?
Back in 1940. By the way, that 1940 Minnesota
the hell out of those.
The 1940 Minnesota team is one of the best football teams of all time, and I will fight you on this. So I am going to put that out there. That was an insanely good team. So who was good before the Super Bowl? Like any of them.
In the AFC? There was no good. There was the Broncos, and that was it.
Wait, no, hold on.
I was telling everyone this.
What about the Browns? They were insanely good in the 1950s. When they were in the AAFC, and then they became part of the NFL, and they joined the NFL, and then they switched to the AFL after the merger. They were insanely good. They were really good. They were probably some of the best teams that the NFL's ever produced. And then since then, whatever.
That would make Jim Brown somewhat of a Bronco Nagurski? Okay.
Yeah, no, that's perfect.
All right, I'm willing to roll with it.
All right, now we've got that resolved. Let's talk about the game we watched. All right, so obviously the first thing you want to talk about if you're a Vikings fan is Teddy Bridgewater, which is why he's not the first thing we're going to talk about. We're actually going to talk about the defense first.
We like to save the best for last.
Yeah, sure. Why not? That's a good reason.
But seriously, speaking of last, Harrison Smith is a remarkably good safety.
Yes.
It turns out. And he also has the misfortune to be a lasty in that he has a a last name for his first name and a last name for his last name.
Yeah, that's unusual. Usually you see firsties, and those are annoying, but lasties, I don't know. You feel a lot more.
Longtime fans of the show will know that I can't trust a lasty.
Well,
and so my question is Harrison Smith the first lasty we can trust?
Are there other lasties that we have been known to trust?
I don't know. Are there? I didn't think there were, which is why I mean this is not a rhetorical question. This is a literal question.
I can't think of any off the top of my head that were Vikings, because I can remember a couple firsty. I mean, you got Jared Allen, right? So that was a firsty. But
see, firsties are relatively common. Lasties are pretty rare, and to find one you can trust is super rare, which is why I pose the question.
See, the thing about Harrison Smith is Packer fans don't even actually know his name. They just call him the guy who could, like the guy we could have had if we didn't pick Nick Perry. So, and we're super jealous about. Just so much bitterness if you go like anywhere after a Harrison Smith interception on like a Packers forum or anywhere around Packer fans. They're just like, oh, look, he's making plays again. What's Nick Perry doing being like the fourth or fifth pass rusher on this Packers team? Cool.
Isn't Nick Perry after Mike Neal on the depth chart? Is that?
He is. So essentially what's happening is, I mean, I know you guys don't want to go into the Packer game or this Packer stuff too early on this, but Clay and Julius Peppers are ended up playing base, and then Mike Neal has ended up rotating and stuff. This Packers team's doing a lot of odd things, but the one thing that they are like deep in is like mid-level pass rushers. Like not really good pass rushers, but just really deep and mid-level pass rushers. They actually had to get Carl Bradford, who was their fourth round pick that a lot of people thought would go in the top 100. They moved him to inside linebacker because there was just no place for him to fit on the roster as an outside linebacker that pass rushes, because they also had Jaron Elliott, who was this undrafted rookie out of Toledo, who had like 5 sacks in like the last 3 games in the preseason. So like, oh, well, what are we going to do with this 4th round pick that we drafted?
All right. Well, I guess we'll discuss the Brad Jones thing of Carl Bradford in a little bit. But yeah, so Harrison Smith, I remember Darren Page, is making this argument that Harrison Smith, is not just a Pro Bowl quality safety, a term that has, sort of lost meaning over time as more and more people have declined invitation to the Pro Bowl and replacements have, replaced them. But I've even seen arguments from people I respect on Twitter that would argue that he's a top 3 safety in the NFL right now. Now, given the decline of the Erics, and given that, the safeties that we normally regard as good, Jairus Byrd, et cetera, are also declining, there, I think, is room in the top 5 for Harrison Smith, but I don't know if he deserves to be there. What do you think?
Well, I mean, this list has to start off with Earl Thomas, right?
It does.
I don't think there's any way around it. Earl Thomas is, I mean, he shut down that Packers offense. Between him taking whatever the opposite of taking the top off of defense is, he putting the absolute top on it, doing that to Green Bay in week 1, and then Green Bay just avoiding the right side of the field because of Richard Sherman. I mean, they absolutely just grilled this Packers offense. After that, I think, Eric Berry isn't doing that good. I don't think you would consider Cam Chancellor a top safety. He kind of has his role, and he does his role really well, but I think in a vacuum, I don't think anyone's taking him over, only under 2 other safeties in the league. I think the conversation would end up being, okay, Jairus Byrd, Eric Weddle, or I guess he's up there. I mean, I guess those would be my top 4. Jairus Byrd played really poorly last week, actually.
But not just last weekend. He's been having last weekend was probably his worst of the year so far, but he's been having sort of not that great of a season. He didn't play well versus the Vikings, and I obviously looked at him before the Vikings game to see his matchups, and he's playing a lot better than Vaccaro, which looks pretty good, but overall he's been like whatever. So I would put maybe Devin McCourty in the conversation.
That's fair.
And I think some people say that Antrell Raleigh deserves a spot in the conversation. Maybe, but I think Harrison Smith is better than him. I think it might be between. So Earl Thomas is obviously number 1. I like Eric Weddle a lot. I think this is probably the year for him to return to sort of prominence. But I think maybe top 3 is a difficult place to put any of these guys because it's difficult to differentiate them. Maybe I put Eric Weddle number 2. Again, he may be declining. Who knows? Which would be kind of surprising given sort of his age and how much physical ability he entered the NFL with, but maybe I'm wrong. And then you've got McCourty, then you've got Harrison Smith. So yeah, I think he's definitely in the conversation for a top 3 safety, which is I don't know if astounding is the right word, but very pleasantly surprising for Minnesota fans.
If Harrison Smith can grow a beard like Eric Weddle, I'm willing to put him in my top 3. That's where I draw the line.
I'm pretty sure he can and doesn't, which I think that's a demerit. I think he loses points.
Yeah, he's number 4 then.
I disagree. I think having the choice to grow a beard and not doing it is as strong a statement as like a Brian Wilson beard.
Really? No.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Because so the only like alternate argument is somebody like Sidney Crosby playing hockey for the Penguins who can't grow a beard and yet still tries because it's expected of everyone on the team to grow a playoff beard. And so you end up with a playoff patchy mustache. And that's
obviously worse.
Exactly.
Well, so it goes good beard. Then I think the next is respecting the fact that you can't grow a beard. And then after that, it's refusing to grow a beard. And then after that, it's persisting to grow a beard in spite of the evidence. I think those are the 4 ranks of beardliness.
Now, see, I would flip your 2 and 3 around. I think choosing to go clean shaven represents a strong choice.
Well, I suppose I shouldn't argue too hard because I just chose to go clean shaven in these last couple of weeks. So you win, Dusty. Oh.
At any rate, you're talking about broad swath of people who can't make a choice as far as that goes. And to me, having the ability to grow like Chris Anderson.
Let's make all the sports, yeah.
Yeah. Chris Anderson, when he was playing for the Nuggets, was clean shaven for a while and then grew in a beard and mustache. And Chris Anderson has like A+, like he rolled a natural 18 for facial hair. He has that like thick hair around the corners of your lips.
Yeah,
like he can grow the thick like Hulk Hogan Fu Manchu. And so he did for a year, and then he shaved it off again. Like he went clean shaven, and then he showed off his absolute just like world killing beard skills, and then shaved it off again.
Well, okay, but the thing with Chris Anderson is that he has so much going on that I think he's just exempt from the beard conversation, despite the fact that he can grow quite the beard. He's just exempt from it because he has so much going on.
But it spoke to me that he chose to grow that beard just to show that he could, and then shaved it off. He was like, "Yeah, no, I got it, but I don't need to show it."
Yeah, well, I suppose you can respect choosing weakness.
Well, then, as long as it's, but no, seriously, any poker player will agree that as long as weakness is a calculated choice, it's probably preferable.
I don't think Harrison Smith is unintimidating people by not growing a beard. I don't think anyone's like, I'm willing to go across the middle and lay out for this one because he doesn't have a beard.
That's fair. So I did want to ask you, Arif, a legitimate question about the defense in week 4 versus the defense in week 3. So we gave up about the same amount of points in week 3 and week 4. And yet those 2 games looked so different from each other. What do you think were the what do you think the chalk lines are that made week 4 different from week 3 in terms of our play on defense?
Well, so what's interesting is that so week 4 we actually gave up more points, right? We actually gave up 28 points to the 20 points we gave up in week 2. So there's a couple of differences. The first is that, not week 2, week 3.
But we gave up the last 7 when we had a lead, right?
Right. So that's a big part of it. That 7 of those points were given up when it didn't matter. Also, I think sort of we tend to evaluate a team in the context of things that sometimes, or a unit, and sometimes in the context of things that they can't control. So when the offense is just sputtering and then the defense gives up points, everyone's just like, man, that was just a bad game for everybody, right? And especially because the first 2 drives that New Orleans put up, I mean, they just wanted them and they got them. They just grabbed what they wanted. And that sets, I think, the the impression for the rest of the game, even though the defense was actually pretty good. And even though one of those drives, I think, was on an extremely short field because it was on like a pick return or something like that. And despite all of that, the defense, held up really well, but everyone was just like, I don't know. If you adjust for field position, the defense was actually pretty extraordinary. I mean, not only did the Vikings hold New Orleans to under 21 points for the first time at home in like 3 years or something like that. They did it despite the fact that they were given shitty field position, and despite the fact that they couldn't generate that much pass rushing pressure, which they haven't been able to do for 4 weeks. Part of it is actually because they were able to shut down Jimmy Graham, which harkens back to this conversation about Harrison Smith. But I mean, he can do anything. I mean, he can rush the passer. He's he used to be weak in man coverage. Now I don't even know. He may actually be pretty skilled in man coverage. He's got fantastic range as a free safety. He can cover the center field, cover a large amount of the center field. I mean, he's no Earl Thomas when it comes to range, but it's pretty extraordinary. And then he's a pretty good strong safety. I mean, he had issues wrapping up, and he had issues taking, running angles, but both of those look like they've cleaned up at least 4 weeks into the season. That was a big part of it because they were able to shut down Jimmy Graham. They were able to get some weight in the passing game. In this Falcons game, Harrison Smith did a good job in his role against Julio Jones when he was lined up to double Julio Jones. It is really weird because we actually had Harrison Smith underneath Jones, and we had the cornerback above Jones, and that's not what you usually see. But Harrison Smith did a pretty good job, making plays regardless. Now, when he wasn't on Jones sort of ate the Vikings alive, which sort of was a fine trade-off between making sure Roddy White didn't do much, making sure that there weren't any other ancillary pass catchers. I mean, I think Toilolo got open twice, dropped it once, which is pretty typical for him. Yeah, and I don't know. The defense was performing at a pretty high level, except for Captain Munnerlyn, who's responsible for both big plays, and like one other play that was probably a mistake. But I mean, you look at Josh Robinson; he's clearly the best performing corner over 4 weeks. That's insane. You take a look at Xavier Rhodes, who probably was the best performing corner of the last game and has done pretty well since that penalty-laden game, or has done well outside of that penalty-laden game. I think, all of that being said, the corners are fine. I wouldn't consider them, great or good, although Josh Robinson is in the conversation for good. It's just there's reason to be suspicious of him, of course. And then you've got, these safeties, right? The Harrison Smith and whoever his partner is that week. I guess it's Robert Blanton, but who cares? I mean, the issue is with the linebackers and the defensive line. And I think that's next in our show notes, this Gerald Hodges guy. Justis, what did you think of Gerald Hodges coming out of the draft?
Before we get that far ahead, I wanted to ask Justis. So week 3, you lost a difficult game against Detroit. And then, this previous week, you destroyed Chicago in all possible ways. How similar do you think the discussion that Arif and I just had was to the discussion that a smart person and you would have about the Packers?
Wow. So Green Bay still can't run or stop the run at all. Green Bay just pretty much made that game in Chicago a shootout, and they ended up winning it because Aaron Rodgers ended up taking he would take the easy passes that he knew you could get, as opposed to the deep plays, and then once the defense overcompensated, he'd take a shot deep. Whereas opposed in the Detroit game, I actually wrote about this on Bleacher Report when I was talking about their passing offense sputtering. He'd have like a tight end wide open on a slant, but he'd be like, okay, I can have him immediately right here, or we can run this double post, that's also coming off the same side and put a bunch of stress on the safety. And if my offensive line holds up, we're going to be able to eat a huge chunk play here. And he would opt for the chunk play, and then, pressure would, happen. And Chicago just couldn't get pressure on Rodgers. So it's really hard to judge.
There's a big similarity between the week 3 and 4 situation between the Packers and the Vikings. I guess my bigger question is, were there any big adjustments or big games from players on the Packers that you had defensively that allowed you to kind of win the offensive battle?
Well, what really happened defensively, which is what I found really interesting. I know everyone really liked Casey Hayward after his rookie year, playing that slot corner role. And what Green Bay's done is, for some teams, some teams he'll come in as the nickel corner, and some teams he'll not. And what'll happen is they'll bring Devon House, who is this longer, rangier corner. I think he's either 6 foot or 6'1", and they'll put Tremont Williams in the slot. And essentially, what happened against Chicago is a lot of the cornerbacks were winning at the catch point, whereas like Brandon Marshall and Alshon Jeffrey would go up and get this, these receptions vertically that they would get a lot on, 90% of the corners in the league. But Green Bay's built their team where they want longer corners on their boundaries.
Isn't one of their corners like 6'7" or some nonsense?
In Green Bay, if we have one, that'd be awesome. I don't think so. I think okay. we have House, who's like 6'1". Sam Shields is no slouch either. He's got really long arms. I mean, they can jump. They don't have Taylor Mays. Yeah, they can jump, and that was really evident. That just winning at the catch point, being able to deflect those balls. There was a couple times where if Sam Shields didn't get his hand right on that ball when Alshon Jeffrey was going up for that thing, it was a touchdown. If Devon House wasn't getting his hand on that ball when Brandon Marshall or Bennett was going deep, and that thing would have been a touchdown. And then Jay Cutler went Jay Cutler and threw a couple interceptions, and that was it.
So going back to the thing Arif wanted to talk about, Arif accurately predicted last week that Gerald Hodges would be one of the stars of the game this week, and that turned out to be the case.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, so Hodges, from Penn State, linebacker U, was paired with Michael Matti. Everyone really liked Michael Matti a lot, but some people were pretty high on Hodges for his athletic capability. What did you think of Hodges when he was coming out of the draft back in 2013, Justis?
So, I mean, I think he was an adequate athlete. I don't think he was anything crazy. I didn't love him in man coverage, looking back at my notes, and I didn't think he could really blitz. I mean, when you think of a linebacker, a true linebacker, you think of guys like that. I mean, he wasn't, athletically hindered like guys like Shane Scove and stuff like that were coming out of Stanford. I think he was all right. I think he went about where he should have, but I didn't see the Minnesota game enough to note him having an insane game. Has he improved a bunch in the past year, I guess?
I would say so. I still don't know about him in man coverage. If he had improved significantly in man coverage, I think we would have seen him against Gronkowski in the New England game. We didn't actually see that much. But I would say that he has improved. I think it's because he's sort of playing with the discipline and instincts that I mean, I'm not going to say he lacked at Penn State, but he didn't necessarily flash them in any astounding way. Not to say that his instincts are astounding right now or anything like that, but I think he played pretty well because he was able to get to the ball pretty quickly. He was able to follow the flow of the play really well. In terms of coverage, I think that he actually did better in sort of the 30 or so snaps, maybe like 40 or so snaps before this game in coverage, or before this game when he was in coverage, and then he did in this last game, which is not to say he did particularly poorly in coverage. I mean, he was only targeted twice. And sort of on film, I think that he looked like he was in a good spot. He was in pretty good position. I just think that, for the most part, the only issue I have with the way he played was, I think one of the times he got open, Toilolo was able to just spring one open against him, if I recall correctly. That's going to happen. But I thought he had a pretty good game. I would say that he did improve significantly from Penn State, but like you're saying, he went where he was supposed to go. I think he's the 120th pick or something like that. And so the fact that I think that he's playing at a starter level, when I think he gave the Patrick DeMarco touchdown, that's the one I was worried about, not a Toilolo, reception. But yeah, I think that he has improved significantly and enough to be a starter, in terms of his resume. I thought he had a pretty good game, but, overall right now, I would say he's he's starter quality, which, as listeners to the show know, is more than I think the Vikings have had at that position for a little bit.
I'm looking at the draft right now. He went 120th. The picks coming after him are pretty brutal. I mean, so he went 20th or 120th, 121st with Khaled Holmes, who had some first round hype for a while, but that was insane.
Yeah.
People like to overrate centers. I don't think he's doing well in Indianapolis right now. The next pick was J.C. Treader, who was picked by Green Bay, who's been hurt back to back coming into his 2 seasons in the NFL. Then Chris Harper, who I think has been cut from at least 4 teams already. Oh, only 3.
Yes. Then one team twice then, right?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
Ouch.
And then Trevarda Williams, who is no longer playing for the
right.
Jonathan Franklin, whose career is over in Green Bay. So it looks like you guys won that spot. Congratulations.
Were there any linebackers after him that were at all interesting? I'm taking a look at the draft now. So you've got AJ Klein and Stephen Means, who, haven't seen. I think Stephen Means was cut.
People like Klein for a while. I haven't seen him. I know people liked Devontae Holloman, who ended up going in the 6th round to the Cowboys. I'm trying to think of anyone else.
Oh yeah, no, that was
that's probably. Yeah, that was probably if you were to go to DraftNext and be like, "Yo, which guy went underrated, went undrafted or underdrafted after him?" I think that's the guy that they'd point to.
Yeah, because I'm looking at these other ones. I mean, there's Sam Barrington, Steve Boharnis, Ty Powell, obviously Michael Motti, Vince Williams. These are not people that I was particularly interested in. I mean, Devontae Holloman, yes. Other than that, no. So yeah, that's all right then. Hooray, Vikings! They got a reasonable starter out of a 4th round pick. Which I would consider a hit. And obviously he's still young, so he can still develop. Right now, I think we're pretty happy with Hodges, given the state of the linebacker core.
So I know that Justice only saw some of the All-22 that was on NFL Network, and I unfortunately missed the 4th quarter. I had previously indisposing obligations. You try to set your life up so you get Sundays off, but sometimes we don't all. You go to work with the schedule you have, not the schedule you wish you had, I guess, as the great postmodern philosopher Donald Rumsfeld would put it. At any rate, Justice and or Arif, are there any standout maybe situations that happened on defense or things that we can take away from the way the defense played that we can potentially put towards this upcoming division matchup?
I mean, we could plug about how good Anthony Barr looks. I mean, I really like him. And I liked him before the draft process, and I liked him more than Khalil Mack, and I know Khalil Mack's cooking. And I still like Khalil Mack. I mean, people think that for some reason me liking Barr more meant that I didn't have a top 10 grade on Khalil Mack, which I did. But I really like Barr. At first, I thought it was interesting and incorrect to use him as a linebacker, how they were using him in the preseason. I know when I was watching him, I was like, oh, man, why can't Zimmer just put him with his hand in the dirt and teach him how to use his hands? Because that would be the fastest way to get him to be an amazing pass rusher. I'm not sure that's his trajectory at this point, but he's definitely, coming into his own as a player.
Yeah, I think so. I was going to mention Anthony Barr. I think people remember that I had the same reservations as Justice. I thought he should be a pass rusher only, despite sort of, I guess, the bevy of athletic skills that indicated that he could do some other things. But, like Justice has been saying, he's been playing really well, especially in run defense. I think, so what's interesting, you take a look at his Pro Football Focus grade. He had a plus 1.4 grade against Atlanta, a plus 0.5 grade against New Orleans. I would probably switch to the degrees of that. I would probably say his game against New Orleans was better than against Atlanta, but I think that's sort of just nitpicking because I think overall he's been pretty good. The only issue that I've had with Anthony Barr has been coverage, which I think surprises no one, given that he hasn't been asked to. I mean, he covered more than other 3-4 linebackers on the edge at UCLA, but that's still not very much. And so the fact that he's still weak in coverage is definitely not a concern by any means. And I think that he's in fact even getting better in coverage. Although again, I'm not so sure that Atlanta provided the kind of players that allow us to really sort of test that assumption. It'll be interesting to see him go up against like Richard Rodgers and stuff like that. But overall, I think that he's been very good. Zimmer's been talking about him fitting. Linemen are staying disciplined and too often making great plays when he only needs to make good plays because he works too hard because he's misaligned or whatever. Those are all like interesting asides, I think. I think for now we can just say Anthony Barr is playing really well. He's doing better than I thought at a lot of things, and he's still struggling at the thing that we thought he'd struggle at, but not nearly as badly as I thought he would. So I think he looks great. One other player I would plug is Brian Robinson, I think, who had a pretty good game until, interestingly, they ran out of offensive linemen and put Toilolo in at right tackle. Then Robinson couldn't get much done because they kept doubling him and taking an eligible receiver out, which of course meant that he did a very good job in terms of affecting the play. Right? It's basically what Clowney did at South Carolina without the insane sacks, at the end, in his senior season. By getting rid of an eligible receiver because they would have to double Brian Robinson. And I'm okay with the Falcons just being down a guy in the passing game. And so I think that until that happened, I think Robinson was having a pretty decent game in terms of getting pressure. He was just overrunning the play a little bit too often.
To be fair, if you're Atlanta and you're having to play Toilolo as your starting tight end, and then he moves to tackle, whoever's coming in for him at tight end, probably not going to be a huge passing game threat.
Right.
Then that might have been
might
actually
just be
the
a
most
fat guy
efficient
from
way.
the stands.
Yeah, who wants a jersey? They're firing off a jersey with one of those T-shirt cannons. Whoever gets it, you're playing tight end.
You're playing tight end now.
Instead of your name, it says tight end on it, and then when you get that one, you have to go on the field. Yeah. So, Matt Khalil, though.
Let's switch to the
happening about
Did
him.
he listen to the podcast? Like, did we totally tune up our offensive line just by you and me complaining about how Matt Khalil isn't getting it, even though the whole coaching staff really wants him to get it?
Yeah, no,
did he just figure it out this week?
I think it's us.
Yes.
So what's exactly happening
but he
with
gets
him?
it now, right?
So
it's difficult to tell what's happening with him. In fact, we actually get this question every week in the podcast. Every week, someone's like, "So what's happening with Matt Khalil?" And then I have to field this question 2 or 3 times a day on Twitter. And I mean, it's difficult to tell. First, the coaches have not been consistent in telling us what they think the problem is. They've said it's these mental problems, right? They've said, once he gets beat, he lets it get inside his head, and then he has confidence issues throughout the rest of the game, or whatever. And then they say it's not a mental problem immediately after that, and you're like, well, that sounds like a mental problem. And then they say there's some technique issues he needs to work on, and so there's not something that they've identified. And we're having this conversation, I think, right after he put together a reasonable game. So I want to clarify that. I really liked sort of the fact that he put together a pretty reasonable game. I'll talk about the caveats to that in a second. But in terms of
he's probably benefiting a little bit from low expectations.
Yeah, but also from terrible competition. Again, I'll talk about that in a second. But also, I think one of the problems that he'd had going into this game was that, I mean, his footwork was off. I mean, it was just so unusual for a player who's billed as a technician and who showed that technique. Not just even in his rookie year. I mean, he did show it, last year. I mean, we talked about last year it was a down year, but it wasn't it was a down year, but it wasn't like it was as bad as those first 3 games that he put together. But I mean, his footwork was off. I think Darren said that he was playing too passive. And if you look at it, it looks like he's playing too passive. I'm the kind of person who doesn't like to speak to a player's mentality on the field, but the way it looks like he's playing, it looks like he's playing passive. He doesn't get the first punch and stuff like that. Now against the Falcons, the Falcons have put out this concerted effort to put their worst 2 pass rushers as the starters, probably because they get paid the most. And that's, really good news for the Vikings. And obviously, whoever they'll go up against. I mean, Croy Bierman is bad. Osi Umenyiora is not as bad, but also very bad. But Atlanta has, Massaquoi and Stanley Mapanga, both of whom are better than the people that they're behind. Either way, Matt Khalil and the rest of the offensive line, Phil Lodeholt too, who had I think a very good game, where they were able to benefit from this fact. And as a result of that, they looked better than they did. So I think what this means is that they did what they were supposed to do, right? Matt Khalil looked pretty reasonable in pass protection. I think maybe a lot of people are taking a look at this game and saying that because he didn't make a mistake, he had a good game, and I understand that because the point of an offensive lineman is to stay consistent and not make mistakes. I think I would say that he had a pretty decent game because, there's some issues with run blocking. He still gave up some hurries. But if this is what we get from Matt Khalil, if this is the kind of production we get for the rest of his career, I'm actually fine with that.
If I had to choose, I would much prefer a better pass blocker than a better run blocker.
Right. Yeah. But all that being said, they're up against maybe the second worst pass rush in the NFL right now. What's crazy is that we were talking about Robert Quinn having this, putting together this amazing season and excusing Matt Khalil's, in retrospect, just bad, not terrible game against the St. Louis Rams. But the St. Louis Rams have put together the fewest pressures in the NFL. And so it's kind of interesting because they got a lot of them against the Vikings. But I mean, if you take the Rams out, I think it's reasonable to, given how much raw talent they have on their line, even if they're not getting the stats or the results that they need, they have enough raw talent to say that maybe the Atlanta Falcons are in fact the worst pass rush in the NFL. Either way, the fact that the Atlanta Falcons are not very good help the Vikings, but also means that we don't have as much information as we would if they were playing against sort of an average or a better than average team. Unfortunately, the Vikings will be up against teams that, generally speaking, are better than average at rushing the passer. I mean, that's just who's on their schedule. But we'll find out more about them in the coming weeks.
I'm just throwing it out there, but last week, both of us predicted that the Atlanta Falcons would be a better team than they appeared to be when we ran over them with our offense. So
no, that's true. And I think we were both appropriately discounting their game against Tampa Bay. Because I mean,
don't even get me started about that frickin' stupid destroyed my Survivor League.
I mean, but those are the choices that you made. I didn't make those choices, and I'm okay with that.
Well, the point is that it would be very easy to underestimate Tampa Bay, I guess.
I'm just saying their pass rush is terrible. That's all.
It sure is.
Yeah, Tampa Bay's pass rush. Once McCoy was out, and I know he has a club on now. I mean, he started to produce, but that whole team was built around McCoy being able to get a pass rush. I know they just paid Michael Johnson. He's not a great pass rusher, even though he's a 43 defensive end who just got a bunch of money. I mean, he's a really good run defender, and he's an adequate pass rusher. And I don't think that's a knock on him. That's just his game is different than what you'd expect.
He doesn't make mistakes, too.
Yeah, But yeah, I really think Tampa, a lot of their woes defensively came from McCoy not being able to produce because he had that club on his hand.
Yeah, there's a lot of things happening for Tampa Bay and for Atlanta that made that game super unusual.
You could say that there were a lot of things working on the Vikings offense that made this game atypical for both the Vikings and Atlanta. Atypical in the sense for a Vikings fan that it is atypical to eat a brownie with vanilla crumbled Oreo cookie frosting, but equally as delicious.
It is unusual in the exact same way. That's true. So Teddy Bridgewater, I think we can finally get to this part of the show.
Wait, who's he?
Just some scrub. No,
we talking about Gump?
Yeah, we're talking about Gump.
We talking about Gump? Okay.
Well, tell me
Gump.
Tell me what you think about Teddy.
Oh, I mean, I
strictly
love
based
Teddy.
on the game, not based on.
Oh, strictly based on the game.
Yeah.
I think. I mean, he wasn't able to get huge plays. Outside of, a lot of it was yak.
Right.
But he also didn't make mistakes, and I think that's huge for a rookie quarterback. I mean, that was Teddy's whole thing. I mean, he didn't have the highest upside in that quarterback's class, but I had a top 6 grade on him because I just thought his floor was so low.
Yeah, no, I think that's.
Floor was so high.
Right,
My bad.
Right. No, I got you. No, yeah, I think that's definitely one of the things that was so appealing to both of us in regards to Teddy. So his longest pass of the game is marked as 52 yards, like Justis said. That was entirely yak. I think that was the Jarius Wright screen. Yeah. Obviously, there's a lot of things to talk about in terms of that screen because it wasn't just Teddy throwing the ball. And if we're going to be completely honest and completely critical, Teddy didn't throw a very good ball to Jarius on that play, but it doesn't matter because the point of that play, the thing that is interesting about that play is that Teddy checked into it out of a different play. And he checked into a play that the Vikings just ran on a flip formation on the other side of the field, which I think by itself is a little bold, but also super interesting that he was able to do that. I know that he checked into a play, somewhere later along the line too that was super successful. I forget which one it was. And he may have checked into a run that ended up getting like 7 yards, something like that. Anyway, that is.
Let me stop you for just a second. That
Sure.
strikes me as super smart. Just from the perspective of, a quarterback who was just brought in to be the starter and, doesn't have the whole playbook and, doesn't have years of experience to, go back and, add plays from before in his career or whatever. For somebody with as, limited a book and as limited experience as Teddy Bridgewater has, to be able to refer back on previous experience, even if it's literally, one or two plays before and
a
execute
failed
on it.
play actually just before, yeah.
Yeah, and to see it in a way that it could succeed is just like really, really remarkable vision and speaks well to his future as a quarterback.
Yeah, I think it speaks to his intelligence. To me, actually, the bigger thing it speaks to. So yeah, I think that, in terms of the strategic, vision, I think that that's good. I think that the greater thing that it speaks to is how bold he's willing to be and how confident he is as a rookie quarterback to do that sort of thing. And, take the control that he's been given. A lot of people, when they talk about rookie quarterbacks, they talk about their tentativeness. And a lot of times what that really means, or rather the way it manifests itself, is the way they either respond to pocket pressure, right, or the fact that they don't attempt to push the ball, very far downfield. But when given an opportunity to be more aggressive in terms of play calling, when they get that ability, and obviously not many rookie quarterbacks call their own plays, although we're seeing more of that. I mean, Robert Griffin did it, Andrew Luck did it. In terms of checking in and becoming more aggressive, I think that's another kind of tentativeness that even just being bold enough to check into a play and doing it multiple times a game. I think that's a kind of tentativeness that befalls rookie quarterbacks too that Bridgewater's not showing, which is great.
Okay, but seriously,
it's peanut butter jelly time. Peanut butter jelly time. Peanut butter jelly time. Where you at? Where you at? Where you at? Where you at? There you go. There you go. There you go. There you go. Peanut butter jelly. Peanut butter jelly. Peanut butter jelly. Peanut butter jelly.
how fun is it to say peanut butter Teddy with a baseball bat? Peanut butter Teddy time. Peanut butter Teddy time.
I mean, oh man, it was super fun to watch. And I know you're a Packer fan, Justis, but you're also a fan of the draft, and you're also a huge fan of Teddy. It must have been fun to watch him play.
Yeah, I mean, as much as I go as like I'm a Packer fan,
Right.
it's really more like I grew up as a Packer fan, and now people are giving me money to write about them, so I continue watching them. But I really have I'm not too biased in any direction. I mean, from watching the draft, you're able to watch a bunch of players and get unbiased evaluations of guys coming into the league. I really like Teddy, and I'm really rooting for him. I know I've talked about this with you guys on Twitter before, but like your draft class was like the dream draft class of like everyone
Stunning.
in like the draft
stunning.
community.
Oh, we killed it.
Y'all killed it. Y'all killed it.
So killed.
But yeah, I mean, Teddy was great. I mean, he pushed the ball down the field. He didn't take too many risks. Like Justis said, he didn't make many mistakes. 10.6 yards per attempt without any interceptions. Obviously, he's coupled that with no passing touchdowns. He did have one running touchdown. That was actually pretty fun to watch. No sacks. He was able to avoid at least 2 would-be sacks, I think, with his awareness and with his feet.
Homeboy should have been sacked at least once.
At least
he
once,
has
probably
amazing
twice.
feet and amazing awareness.
It was his pocket awareness is superlative. It's one of the things that I think stood out in terms of his draft evaluation, and something that showed up here. We saw it a little bit in the preseason. I think that we saw signs that he was showing the sort of pocket presence. His ability to step up into the pocket was something that we liked. But this sort of reaction to pocket pressure is different than stepping up, and it's equally as effective. It was very good, and it looks like he's getting better at sliding, which is great news for everybody.
Me and James were talking about this on the internet earlier. When you watch a Vikings game, in the past, we're accustomed to seeing the Vikings, have a lead, and then the opposing team's defense does maybe one good thing, and then maybe their offense does maybe one good thing on their, next drive. And maybe they score a touchdown and we're like, oh God, it's starting. This is it. It's over. We're going to lose. And there were a couple of moments in the Atlanta game where we could have gotten that feeling, but of course, the three question mark mysterious humans, if they even exist, that got the journalist autographed hats were there to see it, along with James. And James claims that there was no feeling like that at the stadium at those moments in the Atlanta game.
Even when Atlanta took the lead?
Yeah. Like even when Atlanta took the lead, there was a sense on the field like, they're going to have this for a minute, and then we're going to get back on the field and fix this real quick.
That's
not a customary feeling for Minnesota Vikings fans, right?
No, that's definitely unusual for Vikings fans. What's cool about that is the Vikings were able to put together a balanced game without having that much talent at running back. And I say that as a huge Jerick McKinnon fan, of course.
Well, and we managed to put together an entirely competent and actually remarkably competent offensive game and a decently competent defensive game with maybe half to a third of our starters on the field?
Yeah, absolutely. The running backs together averaged 5.6 yards a carry. If you take away Jerick McKinnon's 55-yard run, they average 4.7 yards a carry. It's phenomenal. Asiata obviously had goal line carries. That's why he ended up getting 3 touchdowns again. But McKinnon, I think, was probably the primary driver in the running game down the field, and he showed that explosiveness that a lot of people had already started criticizing him for, despite the fact that before this game he only had 5 NFL carries, which I think was absurd that people started worrying about McKinnon. But, he wasn't catching the ball too well, I think, aside from those carries. But, it showed that. I think on defense, like you said, I think while I had questions about sort of the way the interior defensive line performed, I think against the run, the edge defenders did well. I think Everson Griffin had some other problems that are not related to run defense. But then, like we talked about, you had Anthony Barr, and then you had Gerald Hodges, and then you had Harrison Smith, and they all did a phenomenal job against the run. And for all the issues that Captain Munnerlyn had in the passing game, he also did a pretty decent job against the run. So I don't want to say these are the new look Vikings. It's been one game. You don't want to get too high on a 41-28 victory at home against a team that has not performed well on the road. But you could
get a little bit excited about.
We didn't even mention Jarius Wright.
Poor Coach Zimmer has had probably 4 different Vikings teams to coach since the season started. And he has managed to coach each one pretty effectively.
See, this is the thing. Arif said Matt Asiata 3 touchdown game. Like, he doesn't expect it's going to happen against Green Bay, because that's totally happening. I mean, they don't have a run defense.
Yeah, but they're going to score. He's going to do it on 3.5 yards a carry again. I'm no longer surprised when Matt Asiata scores, because that's kind of all he does. But when he gets gains, that's what surprises me. No, McKinnon is going to be the one that slices you up. Asiata is just going to lay the finishing blow.
Oh my God!
So if you're sitting at Buffalo Wild Wings and you're playing the pick the play thing, then whenever Jerick McKinnon is going to be the guy lined up, you want to be the guy picking run play 5 to 14 yards, right? And if you're in the end zone,
5 to 14.
The run
I don't know, man. It's going to be like 5 to 50. I don't know, man.
Well, no, but there are only 3 choices. Like, that's the way they set up the game. You can either pick a run of less than 5 yards, 5 to 14, or 15 plus.
Oh, see, this is the thing. They need a Packer-centric one where it's like, is Mike Daniels going to get a tackle in the backfield? Is it going to be a 15-yard gain? Or is someone going to deflect a pass after blown coverage? Those are the 3 options.
Well, okay. This is actually a pretty good transition, I think, into moving into the next game, unless there's something else we want to cover in the recap.
Well, I just wanted to touch on Matt Asiata and a handful of friends of mine who are dear friends, but maybe not very good at the fantasy footballs. And they all somehow seem to have Matt Asiata either as their starter or on their bench. And just from seeing last week's game and hearing you guys talk about this week, maybe he's a really good fantasy pickup right now.
Yeah, I think he's a decent flex play. You can't expect him to to score 3 touchdowns again. But A, it's the Green Bay Packers running defense. B, so the thing about Asiata is that I'm not a huge fan of him, not because I think that he doesn't have running back skills. I think that he lacks the physical capability of using those skills. But in this game, he did something that for a power back he should do more often and more consistently. At least he's pegged as a power back. I still don't think that that's actually a really accurate description of him. But, if he is a power back, one of the things he was bad at was driving with his legs, getting additional yards once he got hit square on, moving, the line of scrimmage, stuff like that. He wasn't very good at that. He did that pretty well in this game, and moving his legs, turning his legs on contact, things like that. That's something he did very well. And he showed, the balance that he has. He showed the vision that he always has had, good vision. He showed a little bit more lateral agility and burst in this game, although I wouldn't call it, exciting lateral agility or burst, but much more of that. So, if he puts together another good game, he could get 1 or 2 scores. And for your flex spot, I think, 45, maybe 50 yards plus a score is pretty good, I think.
So then let us begin the Week 5 precap. Justis, this one's for you. You hear every freaking network game, there's some graphic that talks about what a great quarterback Aaron Rodgers is. Even if the game has nothing to do with the Packers, even if it's like an AFC team versus an AFC team, there's some bull crap about how great of a quarterback Aaron Rodgers is. So given all this, talk that's foisted upon us about what a great quarterback Aaron Rodgers is Green Bay still a great team?
Oh man, is Green Bay still a great team? I think when you have a quarterback at his level, which probably makes you shudder based on that question. When you have a quarterback on his level, I don't think you're out in any game. This team really does have flaws on the ground on both sides of the ball, though. I mean, people talk.
Okay, but you could argue that Denver is in the same spot. I mean, Denver has come on, let's be real. Peyton Manning is a better quarterback than Aaron Rodgers.
Ooh, see, I would disagree because I think the deep throws you're asked to make, not coming at the end of the game going against prevent like Peyton Manning did against Seattle, but like midway through the fourth quarter and early in the fourth quarter when you're down, his arm just isn't there anymore. I mean, he's throwing a lot of ducks and things. Rodgers, one could argue the greatest play he's ever made happened on Sunday, and it was called back for a holding call. That touchdown to rookie Devontae Adams. Rodgers threw like a flick of the wrist in midair to a rookie receiver in the end zone after dodging like 3 pressures, and it got called back. And honestly, looking back at that play, I don't think he should have been called for the penalty. I know there were several times that the refs blew calls towards Green Bay or in favor for Green Bay. That play though was definitely one that could have gone without being called.
I honestly didn't look at the replay because I didn't want to see whether or not it was a legitimate penalty, because I just wanted that play not to be called.
You wanted to be pristine.
Yeah, I don't want to see that
That's
play.
Not real.
I'm glad it didn't count, because it isn't, because that play was one of the best quarterback plays I've ever seen in my life. And it was extraordinary. And it wasn't, one of those, oh, that play was so good because it was gutsy. That play was so, it's not like, the Dan Marino fake spike or anything like that. It was just purely good quarterback play. That said, I'm going to side with Dusty on this one, and here's why. If you count up all the things that Peyton Manning can do and all the things that Aaron Rodgers can do, I think Aaron Rodgers comes out ahead. I don't think anyone disagrees with that. But I think the vast majority of situations that you find yourself in, Peyton Manning is going to outperform Aaron Rodgers. Now, in a situation where you're down by 2.5, 3 scores or something like that in the middle of the fourth quarter, I think Aaron Rodgers is probably more capable. But I think that you're counting out the way that Peyton Manning wins and how he wins in those situations. But also B, I feel like he's in fact actually less likely to get in those situations, even if you give them the same defense. And I think that, obviously in the long run, you'd prefer to have Aaron Rodgers on your team than Peyton Manning. I think right now Peyton Manning is a better quarterback to have on your team in order to maximize your chances of winning, which to me is what a better quarterback is, even if Aaron Rodgers can do more things. I think the things that they can both do, Peyton Manning can do better. So that's my thing.
And that's exactly what I'm getting at is, you know, Peyton Manning is, I mean, he's king of the floaters. He's never going to throw a flick of the wrist laser beam pass, but he can throw floaters better than anyone in the league. And he can do a lot of other things better than anyone in the league. And no one is questioning that Denver is in the top 4 teams in the league and in the top 2 or 3 teams in the AFC this year.
Fair enough. Like I said, I like to think that I'm not biased, but I also come from, this kind of like internet scouting background where we salivate over tools and things like that. So I can completely see you guys' side of the point too.
That's why David Fales had to go all the way late. Jeez.
Okay, but seriously, like Denver is dealing with. I mean, they're in a good situation where they managed to have one of the most productive offenses in history last year because their defense was, sidelined by injury and suspension. And their defense is supposed to be better this year, but it hasn't
manifested itself.
Hasn't lived up to its billing, really. And the offense really hasn't lived up to its billing. One could argue that Green Bay is in the same spot, except with less hype and, less good odds to get to the Super Bowl. Like what, to put it another way, what are the barriers between, having Aaron Rodgers as a quarterback and Green Bay being an elite team?
Oh, man. I mean, I don't think they're tied up to Aaron Rodgers. I think there's a lot of youth in the wide receiver core. I mean, I wrote about this, I think yesterday. You look at who the third receiver for Rodgers was all these years. I mean, it was James Jones, it was Jordy Nelson, it was Randall Cobb, it was James Jones again. And now they're putting in rookie Devontae Adams. They're having Jarrett Boykin, who wasn't doing well. And, oh, man, Devontae Adams is going to be a freak in like 2 years. But the thing is, McCarthy's never been able to efficiently use a rookie talent on offense outside of Eddie Lacy, obviously.
That's a little bit different, I think.
Yeah, as far as receivers, he hasn't been able to use, a good skill player in his first year. I mean, even all those guys, they didn't produce until their second and third years into the league.
It took too long, actually, for Devontae Adams to see the field. I think it was pretty obvious you need to see the field earlier.
Yeah, I mean, they really Boykin is still the quote-unquote like starting third receiver if they start in a 3-receiver set. Yeah, the thing is, Devontae Adams was flipping in and out with him in week 2 and week 3. And then week 4, Boykin, I think he had a knee injury in practice, and he wasn't able to go, and they activated Fantasy Twitter's favorite receiver who's never seen a reception and has played one play in his career, Jeff Janis.
Jeff Janis.
So he was their fourth. Yeah, he was their fourth receiver. Julio Janis, actually. Julio, he likes to be called Julio Janis. Yeah, so Devontae Adams had to play the third receiver slot, and I mean he didn't produce a bunch, but if you give him that touchdown that was taken back, you see a lot more potential in him, at least from the stat sheet.
Right. No, I think that he looked like a better receiver than Boykin does already. So, I think that's interesting enough. So in terms of the Green Bay offense, obviously going into the season, there were questions about the Green Bay offensive line. There were questions, of course, about its receiving core, not necessarily Nelson or Cobb, but people were worried about sort of the bottom end of the receiving core, what's going to happen with the tight ends. All that jazz. Obviously, your receiving core questions could be kind of filtered out by the fact that you have Aaron Rodgers and he gets to make up for the receiving core. But one of the things that people are talking a lot about this offensive line, and I'm not going to say it's a good offensive line, but it's playing a lot better than I thought it would at this point. I mean, is that what you've been getting to?
Yeah. So I mean, you really look at their starters, and the only guy that you'd say is clearly above average, not debatable above average, is Josh Sitton. Their left guard. He's amazing.
I think that's only because, TJ Lang is just not playing well this year, right?
Yeah, that's surprising, and I don't know if it's just him getting older because he's kind of on that fringe of the age where you hit your peak and start coming down. He hasn't been terrible. This is what I say about the Packers' offensive line. McCarthy drafts these guys out of college as left tackles. All of them except for Corey Linsley on the roster were left tackles in college. Lindsley was a center at Ohio State last year, and he's currently the starter because J.C. Treader, who was a quarterback turned tight end turned left tackle from Cornell and was supposed to be the starting center this year, also got hurt last year and came into the season and is hurt and is designated on IR and will probably come back at some point and become the starter. But so these guys were all playing left tackle. I mean, they're fairly light to be offensive linemen. And you see it in the running game, absolutely. I know a lot of people are saying, oh, Lindsley's looking really good as, a rookie center and things like that. He's still playing like he's 290 pounds. I mean, he's still playing like he's a very light center, and he's not able to get a drive in the run game. I mean, sure, these guys are able to get into gaps and things quickly and stop the pass rush. But in the run game, they aren't as good as, you'd think a team like this would be.
If you don't adjust for the fact that Lindsley's a rookie, let's say you're evaluating him as a 4-year center, but he hasn't looked good, right? Like in that context?
No, I mean, I think you'd say he looks like a little bit below average. I think that's pretty much where that offensive line stands as a whole. I mean, I think you look at Bakhtiari, I think you look at Lindsley, I think you look at Lang, I think you look at Balaga, who's coming back as a starter after Derek Sherrod, who's essentially a dumpster, playing right tackle. I think you'd say all of them are from that like average to slightly below average, type of range of players.
Right.
But as a unit,
except Sitton, right?
Yeah, I think this is what I've always said about secondaries and the offensive line is really you can plug and play fairly average players and not be in trouble as long as you don't have that huge discrepancy.
Right.
Like you don't have that huge hole where you're like, oh, we have no one who could play right guard. This is going to be a disaster because teams will just target that the entire time. As a unit, they're fairly consistent, which is good think I think Rodgers had 1 sack last game.
Maybe. I don't know. I'm not going to check. I'll just trust you.
Yeah, fair enough. I think I wrote that yesterday, so I'm hoping that is true.
It turns out it was true. It's 1 sack for 0 yards.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, once Derek Sherrod got out of there, that offensive line started to mesh a lot better once Derek Sherrod wasn't getting beat off the jump every single play. And I think with J.C. Treader, there is some debate about whether he could come in and play center right away this season, or if they should with the way that Lindsley's been playing. NFL people are saying that, this guy has an upside of a guy like Alex Mack. So I don't think they're going to try to keep that on the bench for a while. I think Lindsley's
wow.
They really like him, apparently. The fact that they moved him from a college left tackle to a center is interesting. I actually thought that Bakhtiari, if all things went well on the offensive line last year, would have gotten a shot at center because I know a lot of people in the scouting community liked him there too.
Well, I've been a little bit surprised at the quality of play Bakhtiari put together. I know a lot of people liked who he was, and I know I think you liked him too coming out, and but still it seems like he's playing like an average tackle, and to me I guess that's a little bit surprising. But to you that just makes sense, right?
I liked him. I thought he was a zone blocking scheme anything. You know what I mean? I think he could play to all 5 spots coming out of Colorado. I think the NFL Draft Advisory Board gave him a 2nd-round grade, and he ended up going in the 4th round. Yeah, and his rookie year, he really did look like a young Jordan Gross, and this year he started adding a little bit more weight. I don't think he's anything amazing, but I think if you're just average to slightly below average at left tackle, and the rest of your offensive line doesn't have huge holes on it, I think that's fine, and I think that's where he's at, and I think that's fine for a 4th-round pick. I'm fairly glad with how he's played so far.
All right, and so given what we know about that in terms of so where the offensive line is, you've got one player who's very good, you've got a bunch of players who are right below average, which makes the offensive line actually interestingly above average. Given that, what is the best way to attack the Packers passing offense? Given that we've seen some teams do it successfully and some teams not do it. Is it just because Sherrod is out, or is the best avenue to defeat them gone now, or what's the best plan?
I think the best way to go about it is hope that Aaron Rodgers gets aggressive and sending extra men. So at least sending 5 or 6 guys to try to get pressure on him before he's able to get that deep ball off, because that's really how he started eating. I mean, so we were talking about these rookie targets, right? Richard Rodgers hadn't had a reception coming into this game, and he was the
Right.
4th round pick out of University of California, or late 3rd round pick actually, which I thought was a reach. I didn't think he was that great of a talent. He's shown,
Yeah, I thought he was a reach too.
yeah, he's shown some things in the preseason and things like that. I still don't know if I would have taken him in the 3rd round, but he's definitely looks like he's going to be an NFL player.
Yeah.
So Richard Rodgers had no receptions coming into the game. He caught a short little pass to start the game, and then caught like a 52-yarder or something like that the very next play. Rodgers is out here slanging the ball, man. He's tired of hearing your stuff. He wants you to RELAX. You gotta get to him. Like that was Chicago's whole problem, is they couldn't get that pass rush off. And once that happened, it was like, oh, it looks like this is gonna be a shootout. We need to go for an onside kick in the 2nd quarter. Like that's just kind of how it happened.
I thought it was a great call for the onside kick, even though they didn't get it.
Oh, when it happened, I was like, oh crap.
But that's exactly how you got to play against Jay Cutler.
Yeah.
You're either going to win the shootout like easily, or he is just going to step up and end you.
Right.
You got to just lay it all on the table.
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask you guys. Actually, I'd like to ask Justis first, and then get Arif's take on this. Green Bay, Minnesota. I mean, this is an ongoing issue for Green Bay. We actually talked about this about a year ago when I was sitting in the same room doing the Green Bay podcast with you two fools. But injury has really changed the face. Well, injury and suspension have really changed the faces of these two teams. How different would this game look if injuries were not rampant?
So if everyone was completely healthy, and there were no suspensions.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, Adrian
Okay.
Peterson, man. I don't know. I feel pretty confident.
Yeah, talking from the Packers side, I mean, their nose tackle, their defensive line really in the run game it's just terrible. And already there was questions about that interior triangle of the nose tackle and the 2 inside linebackers. Brad Jones is hurt now.
Do you not like who you have at nose tackle?
I remember hopping in your DMs being like, yo, I had to write about LaTroy Guion for Bleacher Report, and I'm looking at his preseason games, and he played a total of 1 snap against the run, and he's going to be our starting nose tackle this year. What's going to happen? And you just
You're like, oh no, FML.
You're just like, all caps, ha, 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 ha. Like, this is great. Like, oh no. Yeah,
Right,
so
the Packers have a
BJ
lot of people injured, right?
Relatively compared to the past years, no. But I guess out from the outside looking in, without the relativity taken into account, they have BJ Raji gone, who by far was like the only nose tackle guy. I mean, they have Guion, and then they have an undrafted rookie from Colorado State Pueblo, and those are their 2 nose tackles currently. Their 3rd round pick, Kyrie Thornton, who is a defensive end. I think they currently have 5 defensive linemen total on that team. He's hurt.
Yeah.
Then also, so Don Barkley was hurt he's still hurt. He was hurt. So once Bulaga went down at right tackle, he would have been the swing tackle to come in. And because he wasn't there, Derek Sherrod had to be out there. We ruled out that dumpster. And then JC Treader, the center, is hurt. And I think he's able to get more drive in the run game than Lindsley is. So I think that would have changed the run game a bit too. So, really, a lot of this is just like on the ground and not being like taking sacks.
It would have provided balance to both your offense and defense, is what you're saying.
Yeah, I'm hoping. I would have hoped, I guess, that a motivated BJ Raji in a contract year would have produced something on the defensive line.
That is a little optimistic about Raji, though, right? I mean, when was the last time you did it? 2010?
I think Green Bay was trying to give him an $8 million per extension in 2012. I think
I remember that.
Reported by McGinn, and he didn't take it. And that looks like a mistake on Raji's side. Yep. Now he played in back-to-back contract years where he hasn't proven much, and now he's coming off an injury also. So that's kind of a sad situation. But yeah,
but you even have an even better passing game too, because Aberderis is out.
Yeah, Aberderis would have played instead of he would have been activated instead of Julio Janis.
Instead of Julio Janis. I think if you get rid of all the suspensions, you get rid of all the injuries, the line moves in the Vikings' favor. I wouldn't say it makes the Vikings a favorite, because the question is, does Teddy play or does Castle play? Let's assume, right, that the best player plays. Let's assume Bridgewater plays instead of Castle in a world where everyone is healthy. I still think that Green Bay would, I think, rightly be a favorite. I just think the game would be closer, just because now the Vikings have an effective passing game and an effective running game. My next question, actually, though, is so we're worried about, or rather, you're worried about the ability of the Packers to push in the run game. If you take just a quick look at Pro Football Focus, the Green Bay Packers have the third or fourth worst run blocking grade aggregate. Some of that isn't relevant because, Sherrod is out and stuff like that, but that's just the aggregate grade. But how much of the anemic Packers running attack is Eddie Lacy? Because he does, for all the jokes that he got last year for a weird angle on a picture, he actually does look fat this year. And he just doesn't look good aside from the one circle button play that he had. So what's up with him?
I hate to keep plugging this stuff, but I wrote this piece for Bleacher Report about the Packers running game, going into this past week. And I said it was too early to, make assumptions about, this is what this team is going to look like 3 weeks into the season with, 13 games ahead of them. But Eddie Lacy had a run against the Detroit Lions that I think it was his longest run. It was like 17 yards or something. And one of the Lions linebackers bailed out of the box in the last second. The Packers had 5-on-4, and Eddie Lacy ran right into the back of the hole. And he bounced out into the hole and then decided, okay, I'm going to accelerate forward, and accelerated to a 17-yard gain. But he did not do so until after running into the Packers rookie center. So, you really look at Lacy, and all those pitch plays that they ran out of the shotgun start making more sense when you're like, yo, this guy has no vision. None of these Alabama backs ever come out with any vision because their offensive line is so good they just hit a hole.
None of them have it. It's astounding.
It's amazing. We're all going to fall in love with them next year. It's going to be amazing.
Yeldon's going to get hurt. And I don't even mean by the fact that Alabama backs don't have any vision. I just think he's probably, he's an Alabama player. He's just going to get hurt.
Oh, don't talk about Tractorcito like that.
All right, so I just did the math. This is depressing math because I did it for the Vikings before that exciting game that they had against Atlanta. But if you only take a look at the Packers running backs, so if you get rid of the Randall Cobb and the Aaron Rodgers runs, and not that the Randall Cobb runs help, but if you get rid of both of those, the Packers running backs are averaging 3.4 yards a carry, which you might consider high because the vast majority of attempts have been by Eddie Lacy, who's averaging 3.0 yards a carry. A lot of that, of course, has to do with run blocking. A lot of that has to do with just Eddie Lacy. The issue is vision, right? That's the biggest issue. But you don't think there are other issues? Because he's still.
I don't think they're driving on the. Yeah, I don't think they're driving on the interior offensive line like you'd like to see. Lindsley, like I said, isn't able to get that drive, and Lang isn't looking like what he used to be.
Right.
Like I said, all these guys were left tackles coming out of college. I don't think you say any of them other than maybe Sitton is a plus run blocking type of guy. I think James Starks was actually getting a lot of touches in that Detroit game, and they didn't run much against Chicago. But I said, don't be surprised. Yeah, don't be surprised if Starks touching the ball more, especially if Lacy has a fumble. He had a fumble in Detroit, and they pulled him out and started playing Starks more. I think last year Starks, Lacy, and Jonathan Franklin, if you adjust the sample size by how many carries that they had, they were all like top 4 in yards per carry in the league. So, and James Starks once again is starting to push out the ball more. He's just not getting those touches, at least against Chicago, because it was a shootout. But yeah, you start to wonder, okay, maybe is James Starks the guy who helped us go on to a Super Bowl run in 2010? Could he be the answer? And Eddie Lacy maybe is just a power back because he has no vision, and you just put him in when you need like 3 yards straight forward.
Yeah. So, well, I mean, that might be a way to finally get rid of Jonathan Kuhn. So maybe don't complain too much. But I was taking a look at, so one of the things I like to look at in terms of running back statistics is success rate, because yards per carry doesn't tend to translate into wins all that well. It doesn't tend to translate into points as well as you would hope, but success rate does, right? How often you get the amount of yards required to be a success, which different organizations define different ways. Advanced Football Analytics defines it as how often you add expected points based on how many you were supposed to get on the previous play. So I take a look at that. The average success rate for a running back in 2013 was just under 45%. And so those are people who get a success rate just like Le'Veon Bell, just like Steven Jackson, just like Ryan Matthews this year, just like Stefano. So those are the people, right, that are getting league average success rate. The people with high success rate are the people who are short yardage backs or power backs in short yardage situations like, Jerome Hill, Ahmad Bradshaw, Marshawn Lynch, etc. But if you take a look at Eddie Lacy's success rate, and it may be because maybe you're right, maybe he is a short yardage back in disguise and he's being played in situations where he's not. His success rate is 34.8%. which is right next to Monty Ball's, which is really bad news, obviously. But here's the worst news. It's below Trent Richardson. James Starks is at 40%, a little bit better than that.
Oh, man, I can't wait till we draft Yeldon next year. The funniest part is an NFL scout actually told me that he really believed that if Green Bay was on the board and Monty Ball and Eddie Lacy were there, they would have taken Ball. But the funniest part of that is they would have taken Ball because they liked his vision, and vision is the key to the offense. And Ball's vision is not great. Maybe Green Bay doesn't know how to, scout vision. I mean, they did draft Alex Green, who played in that wide open Hawaii offense in the third round a couple years back, and they also drafted Brandon Jackson, who actually was a really good running back, except for he couldn't see a hole. That's why they ended up using him as a pass catcher on screens and a bunch of stuff later in his career. So you see these trends, and you're like, maybe Green Bay can't judge vision.
Well, okay, but there is one exception to this rule. That's Jonathan Franklin. He had pretty good vision.
Correct. Yep. And unfortunately, he's not going to be playing football anytime soon.
Yeah, but that's different. That's just playing for the Packers.
Yeah, I know. I mean, there were Packer fans who wanted to start Jonathan Franklin over Eddie Lacy. I know there was a bunch of people. I think Dane Brugler and Josh Norris. Dane Brugler working for CBS Sports and Josh Norris for NBC. Doing their draft coverage, who had Jonathan Franklin and Eddie Lacy as their top two backs in that class.
Mm-hmm. I think, sucks for Green Bay, but, I think, so there's one piece of data that suggests maybe they're not bad at evaluating vision, but you're right. I think the majority of the data seems to indicate, I don't know.
Oh, man.
All right, well, okay, so let's, one last question on the offense before we switch to the other side of the ball, which is, you think sending 5-6 people while Rodgers potentially gets aggressive. We know that Rodgers used to have issues holding onto the ball too long. They still show up from time to time. They're not as bad as they used to be. So all that is true. But, the Packers like 6-man protection, sometimes even just 5-man protection a lot. Do you think that that's going to be a problem against this Minnesota defense? Do you think that – because I remember Rodgers said a couple of years ago that the best way to protect the quarterback is to have more eligible receivers. That's something that he said because he thought having, more people in like 7-man protection was actually hazardous to him because he couldn't find an open guy. Do you think it's going to be a problem to have 5 or 6-man protection?
So I think this is where it depends because the sample size of the season isn't so great. So I bring up that example of when he had that tight end on that slant against Detroit. He could have taken that guy. Instead, pass protection broke down before he was able to get that deep ball off. I think these receivers are struggling to get open. And I think if your fourth receiver is Jeff Janis and your third receiver is Devontae Adams, Julio Janis, your third receiver is Devontae Adams, who hasn't shown much but definitely has the talent, and Boykin isn't able to play. Does it really help you having those 4 receivers out? I guess those are just my questions.
Right.
It's just the inexperience at the receiver core is just not what he's had ever.
All right. Well, okay. So that's fair. And then let's switch to the other side of the ball. So obviously we've talked a little bit about how Green Bay has had issues, sort of in run defense. Those issues, a little bit can be traced to, bodies like LaTroy Guion. But, I mean, Green Bay has had consistently bad, run defense. And LaTroy Guion has only played, 145 snaps, which is more than I thought he would actually at this point, even if he was the starting nose tackle, which he is. I thought they would be just a nickel, just I guess a little bit more often than they have been. But I mean, the issue is just beyond the defensive line, right? I mean, like there's a host of issues, right?
Yeah. I mean, if I want to go, by position on defensive line, they have 5 guys. One is Guy and a nose tackle. The backup nose tackle is Mike Pinnell, who, like I said, is undrafted rookie out of Colorado State Pueblo, transfer out of Arizona State. The only true defensive end that they have on the team is Josh Boyd, who is currently on the injury report and has been injured off and on. The starting defensive...
He's questionable, right?
Yeah. He might be ready to go, but it's a short week, so it's always hard to tell. The starting 2 base ends in a 3-4, and Green Bay's flipping back and forth between the 3-4 and the 4-3, it seems, almost between each game, are Mike Daniels and Dayton Jones. Mike Daniels is 6 foot tall, 300 pounds, and Dayton Jones is like 6'4", 280. Not ideal 3-4 defensive ends.
Right.
They've actually been flashing this year, but the way that they do it isn't really like we're these stout defensive tackles. It's more like, hey, we're already in the backfield. We're going to like trip up your running back. Like I think against the Jets, it's really interesting watching Mike Daniels because I guess the Jets just went with this mantra that they weren't going to use a snap count the entire game. Mike Daniels loved that. He was getting off the ball faster than his offensive linemen were. I think he got a tackle on like a fly sweep attempt. Wow. He was going all over the place. Dayton Jones looking really good as a like quick step penetrator. And I wasn't a huge Dayton Jones guy. I didn't think he was really getting it. So his rookie year, I thought there was going to be a potential, but then you started seeing weight come off as he hit the rookie wall. In the preseason, he didn't really he didn't get bigger. Like he really got back to what he was at the combine, which is still bigger than what he was at college and what he was at the end of the season. But he didn't, he's not that 300-pound 3-4 defensive end that you'd like to see ideally. So I was like, oh crap, this is what he's going to be. But he looks more. He might not have gotten bigger weight-wise, but he might have gotten stronger in his lower body because he's getting really quick off the ball and things like that. If he's making plays, he's making plays in the backfield, and that's essentially what he's doing. Like I said, the interior triangle of the defense in the 3-4, the nose tackle and 2 inside linebackers. A.J. Hawk is always going to be A.J. Hawk. I mean, he's a defensive fullback. People are going to be mad that he was picked like 5th or 6th overall still. But he is who he is. He plays his role, and he plays it well. Brad Jones has been hurt. Yeah. And he's on the injury report currently, so no one knows if he's going to be playing this game or not. But his backup, Cody Latimer, looking better than Brad Jones, surprisingly. I think Dayton Jones dropped into coverage in a fire blitz one time, and he looked way more fluid in space than Brad Jones. Brad Jones,
wow.
I think it's this time. I think it's time.
Yeah. Let's talk about this. So Brad Jones was converted from a pass rushing outside linebacker to an inside linebacker in the 3-4, just like Carl Bradford has been. Is this the result of that?
No, I don't think so. Coming out of school, I thought Carl Bradford was going to be a true linebacker, I guess, let's say. I mean, he's only 6 feet tall. Already looking at who the Packers had at outside linebacker, I mean, with the addition of Julius Peppers, with the retaining of guys like Mike Neal and things like that. Nick Perry is a first-round pick who's still within his first 3 years in the league. I just couldn't see how he could play outside linebacker, but they were just adamant on, this is a more premier position, so we're going to start him out there. And it took him until his 4th game to actually see any time on the field, including on special teams. Yeah, in the preseason. So they were like, I guess we got to move him to inside linebacker because we can't cut our 4th-round pick already, with no film on him. There was just no way he could see the field. So I think that's really more of just that was more like a placeholder for him. I still don't think he's going to be a pass rushing outside linebacker.
But are you worried? One of the things with Brad Jones switching to inside linebacker is that he's not fluid enough in space to be a cover player. Are you worried about that with Carl Bradford? I mean, I'm taking a look at his agility scores. They're not phenomenal.
Yeah, I think Brad Jones's are actually surprisingly good, though. I as much as I'm, pro analytics looking at pass rushers with combine scores, I think sometimes when you look at the tape, you'll see guys like Brad Jones and guys like Nick Perry aren't actually as fluid in space as you'd expect them to based off of those times. Looking at Carl Bradford, I think he's way more fluid in space than
Mhm.
his score gives him credit for,
Sure.
surprisingly. I think the same could be said about Sam Barrington, who's rotating in and out with Lattimore just a little bit. I mean, just to spell him
Right.
out for a couple plays. He hasn't looked as good as Lattimore, but I had some hopes for him that have dwindled a bit now. He's a second-year player or third-year player coming out of Southern Florida. But yeah, I mean, I don't worry about that much with Bradford. I think, if Brad Jones isn't here next year and if Ted Thompson doesn't want to invest in inside linebacker like he seemingly doesn't want to do, I could see him battling with Lattimore and Barrington for that spot next to AJ Hawk.
And you said that you saw him as sort of an off-ball linebacker in the off season or in the preseason, or sorry, in the draft season, I should say. And so this doesn't like concern you all that much then.
Oh no, not really. Yeah, like I said, I saw him more as a true linebacker. I mean, he was making plays all over the field for Arizona State. I mean, he was playing some defensive end, which Brad Jones did at Colorado too. Yeah, really, he was just like this movable piece. I mean, you don't want to say like Clay Matthews, but he was moved around like Clay Matthews was at USC.
Right. No, that's fair. Okay. So then moving on from sort of the people who anchor the run defense. I mean, let's talk about the secondary. So Sam Shields, I think, has been playing pretty well, better than I thought. I mean, I think, first of all, I think he's definitely justifying his contract. But you've been talking
Earl
about
Thomas
this.
has the same contract, man. That still hurts.
What?
Yeah, Earl Thomas and him both signed, like, I think, I can't remember if it's 4 or 5 years, $40 million. I think it was like within a week they signed like almost the exact same contract.
Well, I mean, that's Earl Thomas's fault. I don't think that's.
Yeah, you can't be upset at Earl Thomas for getting a good deal, or you can't be upset at the Seahawks for getting a good deal on Earl Thomas.
Yeah.
That's. And I'm looking at this deal right. That's insane.
Yeah. People didn't like that Sam Shields deal in Titletown. Sam Shields looked good,
but it sounds bigger.
Maybe
than
they
it
should have
is.
used their voting shares to overturn it.
I think one of the problems with the deal is that it sounds bigger than it is, right? I mean, like you can just get rid of them.
Yeah, you can get rid of him after a while. The thing with Sam Shields has always been, he really struggles with double moves. So as long as offensive lines don't have the pass protection to keep a 7-step drop double move play, a post corner or something like that, Sam Shields will hold up fine. That's what happened in Chicago. I mean, the thing about Green Bay is they don't, like I was telling you guys off air. They really have a lot of mid-tier pass rushers. They're deep with mid-tier pass rushers, which doesn't.
So they were able to part with Eric Walton so easily.
Eric Walden, who got the same contract as Reggie Bush, and then the Colts ended up. Yep, and then the Colts ended up using a first-round pick for Trent Richardson. So, yep.
Second of the year.
Yeah, so I mean, the Packers, like I said, I mean, Daniels, Jones, I mean, you have Clay Matthews, you have Julius Peppers, you have Nick Perry, who's a former first-round pick. You have blitzing linebackers who, I mean, surprisingly, AJ Hawk is very athletic if you look at his, like, mock draftable spider chart and things like that. Carl Bradford, another one. Yeah, he doesn't play like it either. Mike Neal, who's getting a lot of play as, like, that third pass rushing linebacker for the Packers, or defensive end, whatever you want to call him, depending on how he lines up. So that stuff doesn't really show up early in the game. But later in the game, once guys start tiring out and things like that, I mean, Green Bay's heavily rotating out Clay Matthews. Some think it's because of injuries that are lingering and things like that. Clay's never played a 16-game season since his rookie year in 2009.
Oh, yeah, that is true, isn't it?
Yep. And so it's really interesting to see how this team is quietly getting decent pass rush consistently through a game. Instead, like, there's no like huge like, oh my god, these guys are just dominating these guys. I mean, Peppers might be the best pass rusher on the team currently.
Yeah, I actually wanted to ask about that. So he's actually been looking pretty good, in not just in one game, but in the past couple of games. It looks like
that old man strength. He's getting that bull rush off. I mean, he's not bending an edge. I mean, that's really like Clay's thing, but like he's definitely getting that bull rush on. He's doing some damage to these right tackles.
So I'm taking a look at I just summed up all the team scores for total pressures. I don't know why Pro Football Focus doesn't have like a thing where I can just look at it, but it's pretty easy to do. So it looks like Green Bay is in the middle of the pack in terms of total pressures. It looks like they're closer to the bottom of the pack in terms of pass rush pressures per pass rushing snap or whatever. But it sounds like the way that they're doing it is it's sort of like the Jared Allen light thing where he does it in the fourth quarter, he does it on third down. And then the rest of the game, he doesn't get as many pressures, but he gets a lot of sacks when it counts. Is that sort of what you're getting from this Green Bay pass rush?
Yeah, essentially that's what's happening. And I think the secondary, as much as, people like to bemoan Morgan Burnett's contract and things like that, which I still don't defend currently, their secondary's holding up. I mean, Tramon Williams looks like he's improving. I know his cap hit is actually pretty, hardy. And coming like halfway into last season, I think people thought he wasn't even going to make it till this year. But he really started turning up his game at the end of last season, and he's looked the part this year. Sam Shields has done well enough to get, a $60 million contract, based on his past. He's been holding up, that pass rush hasn't been allowing double moves and things like that deep. So he's been able to do decently. Casey Hayward and Devon House are switching back and forth depending on, essentially it's how large the receivers are that the team's third receiver is. If he's a shorter type of guy, they keep they'll throw in Casey Hayward. If he's a taller guy, they'll put Devon House on the boundary and move Jamal Williams into the slot. The nickel corner usually ends up not being a corner, but starting safety Micah Hyde, and they'll bring in HaHa Clinton Dix as the safety. Micah Hyde's actually played some linebacker for the team in that sort of flex role that Jared Bush, my bad, sorry for stuttering so much. Jared Bush played for a while when they were light in depth at linebacker last season. So it's kind of interesting to see how all these guys on defense are rotating, because usually, in the secondary and usually at like pass rushing linebacker and things like that, I mean, you generally keep your guys out there. But outside of the defensive line, I mean, people are heavily rotating into this team.
So that's so the inverse of how these things work. So you said Micah Hyde's playing a little bit of linebacker on a flex package. I mean, the dude is under 200 pounds. Has he gained weight?
He does. If he gained weight, he didn't gain a lot of it. The thing is, he might be like the best tackler on the team. I know I talk about this when I talk about my Ducks too. Is like Ifo Ekpe-Ulumu, who's like this like 5'10" cornerback. He's the best tackler on that Packers team or that Ducks team. So when teams run at them and they're like, "Oh, we're gonna make a cornerback make a play," Oregon's perfectly fine with that because they're like, "This is our best tackler." I mean, guys like Morgan Burnett, guys like Brad Jones, those type of guys. I mean, those are the guys people get highlights on.
I feel that. I mean, I saw. We had Antoine Winfield for a while. He's never weighed over 200 pounds in his life. So I totally understand that. I guess my next question then is, so it sounds like Sam Shields will probably match up well against, Patterson, because of all his agility and stuff like that. He's not a particularly sophisticated route runner. He doesn't do double moves very well. He tends to give, those things away. So how do the rest of the receivers match up? I mean, you've got Greg Jennings. I'm really interested in who's going to match up against him. Not for he's coming back to Green Bay stuff, but just because, the matchup is interesting. And then you've got Jarius Wright. And those are the sort of who else is matching up there?
Yeah, I think as far as I know, Jarius Wright's lining up in the slot, right? So I guess that depends on who wants to play outside against Greg Jennings. In my preferred option of the two options being, put Devon House outside on boundary and putting Tramon Williams into the slot, or just putting Casey Hayward in the slot and keeping Tramon Williams outside. I'd rather keep Tramon Williams outside on Greg Jennings personally, because I don't think Devon House is as sophisticated at corner as Tramon is. And Greg Jennings, for as much crap as people gave him last year for not producing a bunch like crazy numbers like he had in Green Bay, he's still a very good route runner. And you could probably, run Devon House out of his shoes if you need to. Right. And that would be scary to me, putting that onto the safeties and being like, hey, look, go make a play in open field, which we haven't seen you guys make. I think I mean, their safeties are playing better. I think they had their first interception. They've had one interception from their safeties since December of 2012. To tell you how bad they've been in the past. Yeah.
Wow, that sounds like the Vikings used to be.
Yeah, I think it was when Chris Conte got those two interceptions on that what was it, Sunday night game or whatever. I tweeted,
Yeah.
I was like, look, Chris Conte had 2 more interceptions in like the past like 5 minutes than Packers safeties have had in like something days. It's like, this is Chris Conte. This ain't Detroit, man. It's the Super Bowl.
Well, okay, so a set you're actually probably going to see a lot. So Jarius Wright has been lining up in the slot a little bit, but actually, when there's 3 on the field, Greg Jennings tends to line up in the slot a lot. You think that's a mismatch for Hyde?
Ooh, so Hyde would be the dime guy. I think I'd rather see that becomes a little bit more interesting because I think House is the speedier guy that can keep up with Wright.
Right. I think that's probably the better matchup.
You would almost want Tremont in the slot then. I mean, I think Casey Hayward might be able to deal with that too. Casey Hayward's pretty good in space. His issue is being able to use the boundary for leverage. Man, I think I could go either way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, fair enough. Because I think that. I mean, Jennings in the slot, I think, is probably the best way to use him.
Probably. You want route runners in space as opposed, on the boundary. But people like to think boundary receivers are the best receivers, so who knows? I mean, for an example, Jarrett Boykin, who's not a very talented receiver, was playing a boundary receiver for the Packers to get Randall Cobb as that slot type of guy. I mean, I completely understand why you would want to use guys like that in space.
Right. And then I think that might be sort of the end of the matchup talk. I think special teams is what they are. The Vikings special team is very good, but their punt game is not. Aside from all those other things, their ability to punt is not great. But the Packers special teams, when Randall Cobb is returning, is pretty on point. I wouldn't call it special or anything like that, but that's something you were missing last year.
Yeah, I think Green Bay has this issue where they don't want to play any of their playmakers returning kicks, but then they realize halfway through the season, oh, this is the best guy to return kicks and punts. So we'll see how this happens. I think they're rotating guys still. It's definitely an issue, and I would like to keep Cobb out there, but I would be worried about Cobb taking so many hits in the open space with guys running full force at them when the replacement is Devontae Adams starting and Jeff Janis as the slot receiver.
So Cobb has been taking the punt returns. He hasn't taken a kick return yet this year, right?
Yeah, which is surprising because usually you'd want those guys returning kicks as opposed to punts because punts,
Yeah, you'll get drilled. All right, well, whatever works for you guys. But so, I mean, it sounds like you're not getting sort of much push in terms of winning the field position battle on special teams then.
Tim Estee is good. I mean, as far as I know about punters, I mean, he looks the part.
He's pretty good. Yeah,
I mean, I don't know. Green Bay really didn't have to worry about the field position last week as they only didn't score on one drive, and that was because of a blocked field goal. Hey, just letting you guys know, it's 10:28 Pacific Coast time PM, and the Bears still suck.
I think that's something we can all cherish.
Jay Cutler just lit a cigarette.
He still doesn't care. All right. That's sort of all the matchup questions I have then.
I had a couple of questions, but you answered all of them in that kind of exhaustive matchup talk. Except, actually, no. Where in the world is Carmen Cordero Patterson?
Oh, yeah. I mean, we haven't talked about the fact that Cordero Patterson hasn't been getting too many touches. It's just evidence of the fact that he's not a very good route runner and that they've been manufacturing his touches, which works, right? I mean, when you manufacture his touches, he does a pretty good job of taking advantage of it, but they don't want to force the issue, especially I think with a rookie quarterback. So I mean, yeah, I would like to see him. Like, obviously the Jets.
Okay, but this wasn't even the thing that started with Bridgewater. Like, Patterson has had so few touches, and somehow he is widely regarded as one of the best open field runners in the league. I mean,
but you have to get him the ball, and obviously,
I mean, y'all know about this Devin Hester guy, right? The whole hype surrounding him. Y'all know about that, Devin? Yeah.
You mean that guy that nobody ever kicks the ball to? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
that's exactly my point,
him, right? Like I mean, it's almost the same thing with him. I think someone tweeted that out sarcastically earlier, and I don't necessarily agree with it. But you definitely do have to find those type of playmakers like the ball, and if he's not a good route runner, you're gonna have to find creative ways to get him the ball.
Well, but I think you touch on an interesting point, Justice. When you compare Cordero Patterson to Devin Hester, I think a lot of teams defensively kind of plan for Cordero Patterson and to design defensive schemes to specifically not let him see any kind of open field, because if he does, then he's probably going to score a touchdown.
Yeah, his touchdown per touch rate is out of control, so I think that's pretty fair. So I think maybe the Vikings are underusing him for sure, but I think it's not as big a deal as a lot of people are making it. Like, I would like to see him get more touches. I'd like to see them not just use jet sweeps or runs out of the backfield, but I mean, and not just screens. And, you know, obviously seeing that screen to Jarius Wright, that was pretty cool. But I mean, Cordero Patterson, I hear, is pretty good at taking screen passes. That's interesting. I think he's got a higher success rate than Jarius Wright on that sort of thing, or he will, at least in the future. He doesn't have to just run out of the pistol, or he doesn't just have to run as an I back, which was kind of cool to see. But you can, there's so many ways to get playmakers the ball, which haven't been explored yet. I mean, yeah, we saw the jet sweep in weeks 1 and 2, and then people started keying in on that. But I mean, there's the rocket sweep, there's the rocket pass. I mean, there's like a bunch of plays to get the playmaker the ball, which doesn't require solid route running that they could do. But I wouldn't emphasize it too much. The offense is working. So
I guess my question would be about Cordero on screen passes. Very Oregon Ducks of me to bring up wide receivers blocking. Would you rather him catch the screen and have Jarius Wright, block a corner, or would you rather have big bodied Cordero Patterson do that same thing?
I mean, have you seen Patterson block?
I have not. This is why I have to ask this question.
Yeah, he had one really great block on this McKinnon run, that really long one. But I mean, aside from that, he's not a great blocker. Really, you just want Greg Jennings blocking regardless. That's what you want.
Yeah, all those. Yeah, I miss watching him and James Jones playing Packers football, to be totally honest with you.
I mean, they did all the blue collar stuff we make fun of, but it was fun to watch.
Yep, absolutely.
And you talk about Jarius Wright blocking. I think he's probably a fine blocker. I mean, the dude is kind of mean, and I like seeing that. So, I mean, he's fine.
Fair enough.
And, regrettably, all good things must end. Consequently, you have reached the end of the first part of Norse Code number 51. Rest assured, when you wake up tomorrow, all the features you have grown to know and love will appear fully intact, well, except for the number of the week. We killed that feature this week because the mailbag ran really long and the game is Thursday night. Tune in tomorrow for some truly outstanding yet wildly irresponsible prognostications and a mailbag with more questions than you have fingers and toes. Unless you're like a freak or something. You can find Justis Mosqueda at JUMOSQ. He has an incredible Twitter feed, and he writes at Bleacher Report and Draft Breakdown. Arif is at Arif NFL. I am at Norse Code Dusty. You can tweet the show at Norse Code DN. You can find the show at NorseCodePodcast.com. And our formula is this: Christian Ponder sucks. See you tomorrow.
Norse Code is the official podcast of the Daily Norseman SB Nation blog and is produced with cooperation from Pompous Jerk Productions. Pompous Jerk Productions. Attitude with attitude. The opinions expressed in this podcast are solely those of their contributors and do not reflect official positions of the Minnesota Vikings, SB Nation, the Daily Norseman staff, or PJP. No information in this podcast should be construed as gambling advice. Please obey all local gaming laws.
Our formula is this: we go out, we hit people in the mouth.